Tadechatna. Ja, idat was ayanach yake tadechatna. Yake ya yoxatinil te kat Johan. Klingit ayashte gachtul tu wuch in. Was klecha ka Keijin takshu hichinaya qone klingit te tu. Ja achlil tin gushtihin yudisagen. Awe kechne kakashat kanak. Klein ku aya kachwaak hastuch eich aya stuchal tu lingit. Hasawe kanachawe ye jechwanean hastu in. Shakshani kakachwan ish. Ya yidat tsu dakka ke yishi. Anyasahash jukatin. Kanki. Ako klechain has uti that hanakaswu art. Hastu atwas kuku hajit has our tea. Konea ya wuch in yuch agachtu la art. Hajuni awe. Hatu dekakwaha. Stekat hastu atwas kuku. Ye atachte shi tachonachawe yagach yidlaki. Stekat yigi dati tachotang. Wasa ushiach sene aya. Hasyan katlakit. Atatawe yutachwatang. Akawe achtuasuku kadenyeji ne wuch in. Jakusachantin. Tachanachlitzini at awe khan. Gwal khan awe hachage ti. Kalkaden wuchin yejetune. Chakawe helchwadasku wanach soe hasakawa akoa. Shingitani o ach. Hasakausa. Akausahai awel the kat uhan klingit hayuchatangi hakusti. Ye aweko ayak ehayati Yesu. Ujinye jagachtune. Which ich gachtu deshi. Ye awe achtu wasagu yisaku. Yiji yiswututli ye hayuchatangi. Ya kwan panins wush kadachachtu da ad atlein awel the kat uhan. A day liach koa. Joya kecha nakahiti kain a ye hayati. Hadat aya hasdak ya hasil kohas. Kanachawe yich eich hasakach saach. A joy hasu toasagu. Yuch atangi o hasawa achi. Chago hako awe. Choach. Ye hasu jien. Hanakya kanas es hayuch atangi. Ya yidat koa. We yak klein tiki awe wuchin ututle shat. Ye shach aya yande gachtu chat ya yak klein. Gunnel cheesh Johan, gunnel cheesh yak aeti, gunnel cheesh. Kakwa akawe kakak konik yi ide. I'm so happy that we're all together. Y'all gonna have to tell me when I forget to translate. When there's many of us, I think we're strong. And I think some of the things that I was talking about, it's been probably 25 years since I started to learn Hinged with my grandfather, Gushtihin. And then I started studying with Kichnáalx, Nora Dowenhauer, Kakashad, Florence Shakely, a lot of different elders, Ruth Demmer, Bessie Cooley, Sadie Ya, Mary Anderson, Kasech, Selena Everson, Achkwe, Lena Farkas, Kuch, John Marks, Bachklein, Paul Jackson, lots of them working inland, Bessie Cooley, Sam Johnston, Aggie, Jane Smarch, and some of the people that I've worked with, and some of the people that you're going to listen to their voices, or maybe you've known them, or maybe you'll work with them, and we're going to lose them sometimes. But we're not going to lose their wisdom because of the work that we're doing here. It's like they're going to give it to us before they go. I think all the time about how am I going to help people succeed in obtaining this language and using it and make it easier and just more natural. I think about that stuff all the time. What can I possibly do to help people succeed with this? And I think anybody can, but you cannot sidestep the work it takes to get there. For some reason, people try to completely annihilate this whole language, to completely destroy our way of life. So it's going to take work to climb out of that. But the more work that we can do right now, the less work future generations will have to do. I think it's kind of a sometimes there's this thought like, my kids don't have to work as hard as me and I'm mad about it. Well, I think I want future generations to not have to struggle so hard. That would be a result of a seed that I hope I could plant. Like, I want us to say, yeah, it was hard for us, but you guys got it easy, and that's great. And we can be resentful a little bit, but we should mostly be happy. When we do this work together, I think it's important. It's important to just come right out and say it. So we're going to work with love and kindness. We're going to give respect to everything. Because sometimes there's just a small group of people trying to do this. And there could be a lot of anger in between the people that are working. For whatever reason, I've seen it, I felt it, I've probably been part of it, trying to be better. But I tell my kids, you ain't gonna get nothing with anger. Just trying to be an open vessel, and it takes a lot of humility to keep saying, like, I keep going, I don't know, I keep going, I don't know, I keep going, I don't know. But you keep building up what you have, you spend time together, you help each other. Kachwanish and Shakshani, George Davis and Marge Dudson, I worked with them a lot. And George used to say, his mom would say it to him all the time. You won't be right speaking with ill will and doing things with ill will. Just put love and kindness in your heart. If your life spins out of control, maybe the ones you're kind with will help you. So I do think, as a learner of Hinged, there's a bunch of elders who told me that they thought for a long time that it was just going to drift right out of our hands. Nora, she said it. She said it's like a strong wind and there's a parachute on it, and it just drifts right on away from us. And it must have been scary for a lot of these elders to just see no new speakers, no new speakers, no new speakers, just keep losing them. We roll the thing back to 1997. There were probably thousands of speakers of Lingi. Maybe 8,000, I don't know. Now there's probably less than 30. But we are in the game of addition. That's our game. And so I'm glad that you're here. I probably said some other things that I forgot. Oh, I know. And when you're here and when we're together, it's important. And let me know if I'm not doing a good job with this stuff. This is a safe place. We got a word for it, adeshi. It's like if you're in a canoe and the weather just starts getting bad, the waves start getting huge, you look for a daily, a safe harbor. And it's an important concept in Hinged. And so that this is okay. It's okay to try stuff out. It's okay to not know how to say it. It's okay to say it wrong. Walls won't fall down. The waves won't get bigger. It's okay. Sometimes with endangered languages, sometimes I feel like we think we're going to damage the language by doing it wrong. But I think it's a poison pill that we've been sort of fed. Just don't try. Just it's easier to just not try. And I don't know why those energies are out there, but they are. So in here, we should be helping each other. We should be kind. We should be kind. We should recognize where people are, and it's totally fine wherever folks are. Because you say, yeah, I remember when I was learning that stuff. Yeah, this is gonna be, yeah, a lot of fun learning this kind of stuff. You have to make a language of use, and you have to keep pushing yourself continuously. I think because there's only maybe 30 speakers left, it's easy to know more than most everybody. But you can't just like stop pedaling the bicycle because it looks like you're way up there. Because I think like if you're going upstairs, if Klingit was going upstairs, it'd be like step, step, step. All right, wait, why are these stairs getting taller? Why do I need a ladder to get to the next step? Right? It starts to get more difficult, like climbing a mountain, right? You're like, oh yeah, I'm getting closer and closer to the top, but then it's getting steeper and steeper as you get to the top. Okay. Any thoughts, responses, questions, things on your mind as the vibrant and growing and beautiful, wonderful language learning community? A daisy. A daisy. Here, I'll put it up on the screen. Uh, and I will share the screen with the gang. So it is daily. And I heard as a daily hit was the name of a place in Sitka for people who need a safe place to stay. Daily. It's a good one. And so it comes from a verb root. There's a verb for a kach, a day. They are watching over it. So there's a verb to like to watch something, to protect it, like whether that's a dog, you know. I saw a really cute video the other night. Like someone's got like a kind of a tough looking dog, like a pit bull type of dog. And they came in the room. They're like, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Just kind of looking like kind of tough. And then you see the camera kind of move around, and there's like a little baby sleeping behind the dog. So the dog was, we took a kach a day with cage. The dog was guarding the baby. So it's doing his job. It's like, I'm just doing my job. Don't come near this baby, even though it's probably the person's baby. Other thoughts, questions, things you might want to share?
I like to write down everything that I hear. I'm always looking at them.
Yeah, I think the tone and the vowel length sometimes takes a while to learn. So I would say write it down because for me too, I would always write down stuff. Like, okay, let me tell you a time I got scolded. I try not to scold people, even though I was scolded, but I get in trouble for this stuff. Like, I taught someone how to ski. They're like, "Can you teach me how to ski?" I was like, "Yeah." And we went to the top of the mountain and we skied down, and they crashed all over the place and got mad at me. And I said, "That's how I learned how to ski." It's like someone just said, "Don't cross them," and learn how to fall. And so, but I try not to do that. Like, I'm like, okay, don't always teach the way you learned. So, but I did learn. So one of my great uncles was a pretty hardcore person sometimes when he would teach you. So he said, he asked me something. I can't remember what he asked me, right? And so I didn't understand. So if I didn't understand him, what do you think I said?
I don't know.
Well, I said it in Hinged. I said Wasaku. And then I got in big trouble. Why did I get in big trouble? Because I should have said which is I don't understand. He says, I might have been asking, who's your mom? You're like, I don't know. And so then I felt bad. Like it's it's not kechwasaku. You gotta know when to say which one. So I was like, all right. So I pulled out my notebook. He says, you have to remember you can't write this stuff down. I was getting like, it was pretty hardcore. Okay. And then when he looked away, I kind of sketched it down really fast, right? Because I do, like, sometimes the memory, the muscle memory part, I write it down and now I remember. But I'll tell you a couple of things. One is keep a specific notebook just for Hinged. Don't put your grocery list in there, your plans for building the greatest smokehouse in the world, your next novel, whatever. I don't think you should mix them up because you can build stacks of them, and it's sort of for me, it was a badge of honor. I had 20 notebooks that were full of notes on Hinged. And it might be fun to go look at them. I'm afraid to look at them now because some people are like, that's wrong. It's okay. It's because of how you're learning. But then don't worry about writing it down wrong because it's your notes. You're not teaching from that notebook. But then make sure, just have a system, like so you write it down and then as things carry on, circle the parts that you think you might have to check. Find someone that you can check it with. The vowels do change, short, long, high, low, and sometimes they'll move back and forth. There's one vowel that has 4 different forms. As long as you've got the vowel group right, that's close enough.
How do you say I don't understand it?
You don't know. I'm just kidding. Oh. I'll show. It's in here. I think it's in here. So the verb root is. Oh, am I sharing my screen again? Hold on. So the verb root is ge, which is to understand, to comprehend something. There are, if you haven't taken a close look at verbs, you're going to learn how to read this code. Capital N is a noun. In this case, you are going to use a possessive pronoun. Ach for my, I for your, de for their. Da is around something or about it. Could be either one. Ya, in this case, has to do with, I think, maybe intellect. And then k is an interesting one. It means like some given space, an area. You're going to see it all over the place. It probably means something deeper than that, but we'll get into that some other time. Sh is the end of something. S is the classifier, so you should expect it to be si or sa. Si if it has happened, sa if it hasn't happened. And then you get the root, and it is going to stay high. So the way that we one of the things to look up is what we call the imperfective, which is the right noun. And it says do, da, ya, kushusege. But you're going to change the do to ach. So if you say, I understand it. Ach da ya kushusege. Everybody say, we're going to change it to ach. So everybody say, ach.
Ah.
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 Ya.
Ya.
Pushusage.
Okay.
Now those were all low. That's low, low, low. All low, all short. Pushusage.
Shisage.
If you put klesh in front of a verb, it has to change. That verb must change. English, you could say can, cannot, right? So you could say not, or you say did not, right? So that it can change, but it doesn't go through the prescribed changes Lingi does. So what happens when you put klesh, you end up with, if you were to pull this thing apart, you have k, sh, sa, ge. But that kind of gets absorbed, but it also knocks the letter A out of sa, which is pretty wild. If you haven't heard stuff like this before, it will all make sense someday. For now, we'll say klesh is not. And there are about 5 different ways to say this word. Klesh, klesh, hesh, tish, klish, with just the L. Those are all not. But as soon as you put it on there, the verb will go to a negative form. So everybody say klesh. Da. Ya. Pusheske. Pusheske. And that vowel went short. Okay, so keep an eye on that. Right? So now you know, I understand, and I don't. What's interesting in Lingi is like saying I don't understand is really hard and long, right? So it's just comes with the territory. That's okay. Other thoughts, questions?
Yes. So the first one was positive, so that means I do understand.
Yes.
Thank you.
You could say, so if someone tells you something, and if they just keep explaining, you could say, "Ach, da ya kushisake, and chish." I understand it. Thank you. Oh yeah, I forgot. So the advanced Tlingit students, I asked them to bring some things to share with you all, and I think we should do that now. Unless anybody else has a thought or a question.
I have a question about in our sentences about helping people who are in sorrow. Ishandain. And is it SHAA like in Ishan, or does the vowel get shortened?
It does get shortened. So for those of you, I've got a friend who studies a lot of Tlingit, and they haven't had any kids yet, but they said when I have a kid, and their middle name's going to be Dane, so I could just keep changing their first name to different things and make adverbs. I was like, that's the nerdiest thing and the greatest thing I've ever heard. Because I wanted to name my dog Dog because my previous dog was named Dog, Kate, and that was stricken from. It was not allowed, and I wanted to name our second child Dak'a, which means number 2. That was also not allowed. So, thankfully, I have a partner who's sensible. But you could take a lot of verb roots and put Dane on them. Not every verb root, but quite a few of them. And sometimes it's a longer form of the actual verb, and it changes it into an adverb. So Ishan, as a verb root, means like pitiful, or sometimes sad, or sorrowful. So you could say, Tutla Ishan, they feel sorrow. Yausha Ishan, they look like they're sad. Then you could say Ishandain, pitifully. But then it kind of depends too on like what comes after that, because it could mean suffering, it could mean some different things. But as you study Tlingit, you'll start to see this Dane pop up. Some of you might have already heard Kedain. That comes from the verb root K, which is good. When you put Dane on it, it pushes it to become an I. It becomes Kedain, right? Nikdain, with an intent to harm someone. What else? Kudzidain, amazingly. Any other Danes that you folks can think of? Shishzidain, easily.
Ishan.
Ishandain, pitiful. Yeah, what? Yes, but that one, it does go short. So Eeshan, D, high toned E-I-N.
Sheesh.
Ah. Okay. Words of encouragement? I think it'd be fabulous. Yide kakwaha, shtakat yuhan. Ya hin pa ku.
Ach twasagu in ye daichakai. Ego aya chwantlik at Johan. Yak ea ya tsi achwalkini. Gunnel cheese had ya adi. Yak ea wewut in ye ji to nei. It ain't singit do yes too.
Ganchish. Ukecha. Asatse.
Yeah. Tu yake. Ya yi hoot kahai. You do a sock. Hayu katangi kakulaka woo. Gunashtish. Linget. Slinket. Shutuka tultu. Nuch.
Ganchish. Ukecha.
Iguaya Juan, Stu Lingi, Yukatangi, Lagi, Stu.
Ukecha. Ganchish.
Edichet. Tlikat Johan. Yiguaya Khun. Shkun wana Khunkian. Yikakatu Klegi. Awe. Yande ya yana clock. Yagaktu clock. Yiguaya Khun. Yiguaya Khun. Whichwa?
Chish chawe.
I'll do it. Yuhan kunahyake ye jine. Yisikuge Quizlet. Kanaya kanai ak. www.quizlet.com kachu we Quizlet app. Shesh dana itinach ye uti. Tlinkit ka linkit Quizlet iga guhwatis. Shayada Hain learning sets yeti. I put that all in the chat.
Ganchish. Ukecha.
Tried to anyhow. All right, there we go.
Tsukaka. Hadisa.
Hat kingisti edach kosti sadzinuch kles cake bedasit yek un nagati hayukatangi we video ton ka ezawa yisetin kunach yak e
Kan cheese. Check echawe. Yeah, awa.
Ideya natu at we ach ayawa ade ye haslik nagut hasatu tua ach in hawut utank cheyu click siwaha
Echawe kan cheese. Tsukaka.
Oh, was I on mute the entire time I just said that? Yagoya Kwan, look at you on. Yang Tutan Aka Ye Kakote. Yakaya Xitini Yaga E. Yakaya Kwan.
Kan cheese. Wukecha. Wukecha.
Is this to say to people to encourage them to learn language?
Yeah, awa.
Awe ak shkasnigi. Yuhan sak chak achana we sha Washington dak siudak wusitan we sha kat ye yaksika kinaat itinakhyati we sha kat yasika klas shugwa achat klas ade chat goslisaye we slingat you katangi we achana we sha yakhyati siadak wasitan kat klas ade goslisaye. I had a girlfriend in Washington once, and it was raining really hard, and I said, "You need a coat," and she said, "I'm not sugar and I won't melt." Our language is like that. If you use it and you get it wet, there's no way it will melt. So don't be scared to take it out in the rain. In other words, you're going to make a lot of mistakes and you're going to get wet, but everything will be okay.
Okay. Kan cheese. Wukecha. Kan cheese. Wichakwa. Tsukaka.
I can go here.
Ah.
Intuition to cut Yahan. Hatu Yayati Ashuka Yuk Tangi. Iga Horn.
Okay. Kan cheese. Echa kuchin. Chika. Kiwi.
Kataya,
Ah.
want line eiget, achtuasigu we schoon want, Hwaji we Lingit, you adangi, atlilko hasta you adangi, ye go kon, gonna church.
Yikehawe. Cheese plain. Oh. Yata. Okay. Gonna cheese you han. Wukeha. Ade hastui new khaylat kia. Ya yidat hachako kako yu khatangi. Achtuasagu tua ahi. So we're gonna do a listening exercise and reading at the same time. It will go kind of fast at times. There will also be, I wasn't there. I was 5 years old. But I think they had a recorder that they were moving around, and so sometimes it's not as clear as others. But this is wonderful language. These are excerpts from this is sort of like probably 4 or 5 speeches sort of put together. And it's a little bit unorthodox because there's actually lots of speaking back and forth from other folks. But this is just taking an example from one speaker and just saying, what can we learn from this one speaker? And one of the things that we'll be doing in both intermediate and advanced Tlingit is taking a deeper dive at some of these speeches, which I encourage you to study, which are in Hatu Nagu Yis. There's a lot of stuff you can do no matter what level you're at to keep coming back to the same speeches, same stories, and figuring out what you can pull from them. There's so much stuff that was left for us. We had an uphill battle with learning the language, getting more people speaking, getting more people interested, try not to hurt too many feelings. I hurt people's feelings, and I usually feel bad about it. But sometimes I say things like, if you don't want to learn Tlingit, don't live on Tlingit Ani. And some people get mad at me and say I'm shaming people and making them feel bad. And I'm sorry for making people feel bad. But I also feel the pressure of like, this is enough, but we still need more. Like, how do we get to 100? How do we get to 500? How do we get to 1,000? I just want to be there when I see someone. I'm like, they're speaking Tlingit. I don't even know who they are. Wow. I had some friends in Hawaii who told me that. I said, I don't really remember like the day or the time or the year, but I just remember when I didn't know every single person who could speak Hawaiian. That's where we got to get. So then you got to be careful because you can't just say Nana'i, because people will be like, oh, you told them death for you. Then people will know when you're yelling at someone or saying something unkind, which you should be careful with. But coming back, we're going to take it. So what I think we'll do is we're going to listen to it. I'm going to try and scroll along and keep the mouse pointer at about where the language is. I think the recording, I made a mistake, and so it goes, and it backs up, and then it goes. So I might get a little lost on page 2, I think it is. Then we're going to take a look at this again, and we're going to take turns reading the sentence and just sort of looking at some of the things that are in there, because there's wonderful stuff in here. So here we go. Let me make sure I shared my sound. I think I did. Okay.
تقني سياقه وكاويته وتقص يقطنك وتحتاج وجهنا في شيء خاصه ليه يا كاوي كاخي شوتي أقصتي هاتين كسرتي هاتين أخي شيء تقني تياغو يستفيد خصيخ يوهيتك وسط شيء يقاجن دوز وقاجن دوز يسيكو يا كنختي نوه ياكسين نوه خوسي يا تيشتو تيا وجن دوز كن شو وتا تختان يا تياغ يستقشي عادس شوتانية يا تكت يا خي يا خسية وتشي شيء أخو وتيخ أقصتي كل تيجي أو تيج عادس النيج كيك أو دوشي كندون قاتي يو أشكون قصتي
كل شيء شوا
الجو يقبستي يقبستي تخنخس قبتي يا هاتات يقطن كيودس قبتي قبتي يو أشكون قصتي
كل شيء شوا
الجو يقبستي يقبستي تخنخس قبتي يا هاتات يقطن كيودس قبتي قبتي سياو يا إيتت يا تودس قوتي هاتين قصتي وكاخيش قشخين أقستي
كل شيء شوا
هاتي قوي أكايا هاجنس يا هاتين قصتي ناسي وادي أكنت تقوي هاجنك أوشو وتفشت أو يا إيتت وتلق أختو خاقوتك يسير لاسك تتانا خطهاني أنا تاقوتكاكن يق حاسيش كواس آتيس جنيه أدختشي هان قاو هستويتو تشي هستويت كي أول شاتي آقا تشكت كيك وخي خاتن قصتي شيء يسين نقوه قوة تسقطه أكاتا وسقطه تجاقو دوتك هاتلت خاصتي يا خونكش هاتن قصتي أو كاتا سقطين أو تشيونا نيجي كنا تشيشها أتانا خسوتاناك يقصتي يا هاتن قصتي أدشتوك هاتتي أتقصك شيش قوانا وجه يا توقيك كي واقعون سيخ يقوتان كي رخصني يا توي سيد خطيئة وقالنا خاتيني قاو توقشا يا إيتا توي أكاها جوزيسا يخشو تتلتاقي آسن جتختيه تاك هاتي آتين نفتتي يسير لاسكي أنا خاتسي ونق قاكسل اكتشون سيوتان خاتي كتاتي تخونا تقتي هاتيش كوساتك يقاي أتشو قيدا كنتشي تو أتشو تنيك أو تعشو تكواس يتكواو هاتو يتين ده تخياته ويوشتو قشكن أو تياكي قيدا خاخت يا يقوتنك يا إيتت قصتيك يا إيتتاك تشكو يا إيقوخاتنك يا يخليشكو يتقنيخ هكي قوك هو يقوتنك يا قخسانه يكي نستيش هو تياكو كينك وكاخشو تتليسوخ هاتلكو خان قادس قنوكو يا أوه يا إيتت
Yaxqayisnu kutaki. Yetunuki katukutin thelina yatsaqishasi tiqanih. Yak awe. Ya itatauchi teo kautawa tlakeweja wahato uchigin. Achawe yekayat chawe yekaya kayiyatke. Ya kati ene tlatatawas kuchakawa yawasahi. Hatlilkohas ate yesineye. Awe tau tutlihache hawak kiyaka. Achawe kakautowa ket. Te kautowa kunaweha. Hatlatlikwas hakakas hastu kusti kastu yukotanke. Te anawa tutlihache tawa haji kakiya ket. Achawa suhete shukwaktutan. Ea kusketaket. Haji kanakas kautikit. Hakakas katilkos. Ya itatawe. Ya tu. Ya kelk. Yukotanka watachi ekote.
This one up here, okay. Before we go into sort of looking at it, any thoughts, questions, responses? Big speech. There was a lot of things in there. Goes by kind of fast.
It was fast. It was the first time I'd seen someone actually use just for not, or like you said, that negative.
Yeah.
First time I've ever heard or seen it.
So it's in there. There's other more complicated, like there's no way this could happen. That's a really complicated mode. There's also like, so there's these multiple ways of speaking Hinged. My perspective is there's kind of like people who know each other really well and nobody's listening to them. There's not a whole lot of limits as long as no one's really getting insulted. I've heard people tease each other, make fun of, to be honest, don't do this publicly, but they make fun of each other's lineage sometimes, relatives sometimes, clan, but you got to make sure everybody's on board and nobody can hear this stuff. But dirty jokes, funny things, it goes on and on. Like whatever people are comfortable with, they could do it. If someone is listening, then you got to clean it up. Then you got to make sure that nothing's going to be said where that person might go back to their community and be like, you should hear how these guys talk. Terrible. So then you're being very careful about the things you say, how you tease, what kinds of things might be funny, so you're not crossing any lines. That's phase 2. Phase 3 is if you're asked to speak in public. So you're supposed to stand up in front of people, and now it launches into a whole bunch of formalities, looking at what clans are present, knowing what kinds of things to say, not talking about yourself, being very careful not to brag about yourself or your clan or your direct, like your children and stuff. You could do a little bit, but you gotta be real careful with that stuff. Then for me, phase 4 is storytelling. So if you're moving into storytelling where it's not like, stand up and tell us what happened when you went to the grocery store. No, it's tell us this story about this little beaver that turned the land upside down. Now it gets into a whole lot, there's like expectations in terms of what's supposed to be said, how it's said. The language starts to get more complicated. Then there's ceremonial speaking, which is what's going on here, where you are maybe talking to the spirit of something. Maybe you're talking to the trees. Maybe you're talking to the particular animals. Maybe you're praying to an ancestor. Maybe you're talking about something that just happened and you're trying to make it better. There are a couple things that happen with this, and it's mostly, I think, where the language is going through your head. It's a higher, so like, if I were just telling a story, and I say, right, so it does have this thing where I'm talking a little bit louder than usual. And even like giving you words of encouragement, like it would have this, it would be very similar to that. But this other one where you're doing the ceremonial stuff, so it's up in this higher, the whole thing is up in this higher register of your voice. That's what you hear. So you can watch a speech from Kichnáalx, and he talks a little bit slower and like at a lower register in his vocal sort of range. So yeah, it is something that happens with, this is ceremonial speaking. For context, this is also one of the first times they brought some of the songs that used to only happen in Kichnáalx outside of Kichnáalx. So they were talking about that as well when they start talking about things being sensitive and stuff. And if it's the first time you've encountered it, it might be tough to read the Tlingit in the English at the same time while he's talking. It's going by very fast. Scrolling, I gotta get to the next page and stuff. Other thoughts?
Well, you also can't read the English and the Tlingit at the same time, because it doesn't directly translate. The English is like not, it's like some of the ways that it had been translated before, they're telling it how you want to say it in English, but it doesn't coincide with the Tlingit.
Yes, so so the further you go with Tlingit, the more you start to become a translator yourself. And it's an interesting journey. I think as you start to reach a higher fluency with the language, you're going to have to reach a point where you let go of English and stop translating for yourself, which is it's very weird when that stuff happens in your brain. And I've had plenty of conversations with learners who will say, well, I can understand what a speaker's saying until about a minute in, and then all of a sudden I can't understand them anymore. And I said, well, I think you're translating for yourself, and then your brain kind of reaches its limit. But if you can just give yourself over to this whole other language and just say, it's okay, English, we'll tell you later, then you get into this more fluid mode. But it's very hard to just do that, because I feel like the English side of your brain is like, if you let go of me, you're going to drown. But it's not true, right? And then I think also the translation is, you are going to have to decide, if you start to translate something, what is your method of translating? Are you doing so like, as we look through this and we sort of go, it doesn't really line up. So we say chawa chakawa yide away daqach yuchatangi. We'll just go ach ish ite ganech. I gotta fix some things as we go. Ziyak away chakawa yide away daqach yuchatangi. And we look over here. Yes, my father's surviving relative. That lines up. Ziyak away. That lines up. Chakawa yide away daqach. It always just falls into space. That doesn't line up. Iyuchatangi, your language. So sometimes you got to think about this stuff. And I think I worked with Nora Marks, Dauenhauer, Kichnáalx, and Richard Dauenhauer, Huayinak. And I think their intention was to elevate Tlingit literature, which means they wanted it to read in English the way it sounds to them in Tlingit, where it's this elevated, it is a very elevated form of language. So instead of doing a sort of a line-by-line translation, they would rearrange it. And those are decisions you'll make, which is usually based on the question, who are you translating it for? Other thoughts?
Just very beautiful. I don't know how to describe it. The style is very poetic.
Yeah, like the rhythm of it, the feeling. There's tons of metaphor in here, walking into the waves, and there's all the verbs that he's using to talk about the lid off of a box. It's the box of wisdom, yakuske decade. And then like there's one verb in there where it's like you just nudge something to get it to move a little bit. So it's not like pulling it off. It's like we have only begun to nudge the lid off of the way our ancient people used to do things. And so the bigger the occasion, the more the language will call for metaphor. That's just another thing as well. Let me check the chat.
One thing that I really noticed was it has a good chunk of that song, Hinged Tutan, where in the very beginning they use that language right in the very beginning. And I know that because that's a really popular etchi in Daisling Kwan.
Yeah. And so I really like to listen to this speech because there is a song that was made from these words, right? And so folks were in the audience listening to this. They recorded everything. They translated it all. They wrote down the Hinged. And so I kind of want to back up here a little bit and just do a quick walk through some of these things. Maybe I'll start here. Yang adeyeji ye klethatu wa ushku chakawa yichya was achi hashishko has ades janeyi ade yes janeyi ye awa. What are you folks seeing here? Some of you have been doing this a while. You might need to help us out. Adeyeji ye.
Is work.
Yes. So there's ade and ye on either side of the verb. Those are like a little bookmark to a verb. And it changes the way the verb works. Because instead of just that verb, ye ji ne is you are working. A singular you. But if I put ade and ye around it, now it becomes the way that you are working. So now I'm talking about it as like, I might say, it's really good the way you're working on it. I might say, well, I won't say anything mean about it, right? Let's say with the nice stuff. But so now it becomes the way. So the way you are working. How about that part?
We don't want.
We don't want. Chakawa yichya was achi. We'll just stick with that part. Chakawa yichya was achi. Kawayik is into thin air or into space.
Is just.
Just. And yawas achi is there's ways to tie verbs together too. So they change a little bit when you say like good to see you, I don't want this, I want this to happen. We don't want it to just echo into thin air. So the verb is echoing. Hashish kohas ade yes jene ye. So there's that ade ye jene ye. And this S is a plural. So we don't want it to just echo into thin air the way our ancestors worked. So that it's tying some concepts together, right? And there's some big things. Like one of the biggest statements that I pull from this speech is like, we're just praying that it survives. We're just praying that our language survives. Otherwise, our descendants will only be able to read it from books. I take this speech to heart in a lot of the work that I do, where I'm trying to get as many learners as I can into the books, deep into the books, and then off of the books, so that you can talk without having to look stuff up. That's all of our collective goals, is just to be able to say, dictionaries down, go, talk about stuff. And that's a big step. De a autushaji at awe a hawakiyaka. There's some complex things that are going on in this one. This is a verb. De a autushachaji. So it would also be de, or just without anything else around it, it would be autushachach. And what that verb means is we have given up. We are in despair and we give up. When you put de before a verb, it means it already happened. De a autushachaji at aweh. It's something we had already given up on. Hawaqiyaka. Another complicated verb that you don't see very often. This thing we were told to look at. This is all about our culture, it's all about our language. What about achawe kakao tu waket? Any thoughts on that one? What is achawe?
That's why.
That is why, or because of that. This is a very handy thing to start learning how to use. I have no money. That's why I didn't go to the store. I had a whole bunch of money. That's why I bought this thing and didn't give you your money back. Going back to the bingo store. What about cacao to waket? There's a we in there. This to is
That, does it have something to do with seeing something?
not quite. Let me pull this down.
Well,
We untied it.
Yes, that
oh.
that because of that, or that is why we untied it. De cow to aqun awecha. Hatla shit kohas. Hatla kakas. Hastu kusti. Hastu yukatungi. Oh, I should be asking people to read these. Dang it! Forgot what I came here for. So we got de before a verb. So it already is something. It already verbed. There is an ending on this verb which is pretty interesting, which is saying it doesn't happen anymore. What's the rest in there?
Something like already we used to have tried.
Yes, we had already tried, but it's also communicating we're not trying anymore. We had already tried and stopped trying. You could say those things at the same time. Cha is putting emphasis on something. I like to translate it as you see. Hatla shishkohas hatla kak hastu kusti hastu yuchatangi. It's all one sort of tied together concept.
Our grandmother.
Our mothers, grandparents, our mothers, uncles, way of life, language. You can stack kinship terms. You could say, ach ish tla, ach tla ish. I think we start to get more than two. You got to start putting du. Ach tla du ish, my mother's father's father. But then you just do after it. We had already tried and stopped trying the language and culture of our mother's grandparents and mother's uncles. Anybody want to read this?
They are to haji at away haji is.
Sheesh. They are out to Shakaji Atawe Haji, yes. How does that work?
Well, it's before.
There's a day, right? There's that, or in front of the verb, right? This is
Already happened.
it already happened. And so we kind of saw this before, but it's also kind of a funky verb. And it's a verb. Another thing you can do to a verb is there's a certain suffix you could put on an awful lot of verbs to also turn it into an adjective. So you could take yak-a, good, yak-a-yi, douche, good cat. Kesh-ushke, shushake-yi, kesh-ushke is bad, shushake-ka, the bad person, right? So that's what you've got here. But it's a little bit more complicated. And then you've got this noun ut, which is a thing. It's a thing we had already given up on hajiyis for ourselves. These are big concepts. This is not the most cheerful thing. But the reason why I like to look at this stuff is I say, look at us now. We are climbing out of this thing together. It's based on the words that they left, saying, I just wish it would happen, I just wish it would happen, and now it has happened. For those of you who are fairly new to Hinged, there's huge concepts here. It might seem like I have no idea what's going on, but you will learn all of the things. You will learn how to spot so many different things in here. And we'll keep coming back to these same things. And we do get repetition. Haji, oh wait, somebody read this. Goodness cheesh, haji kakiyaket. So there's that, we see that ket again. Oh, we saw that. There's haji, okay, there's something going on there. What are we seeing? Hour. What's G? Anybody?
At our hands.
Yes, in our possession. And there's this ket again, but now it's kakiya ket. So change it a little bit.
You will.
You did. You untied it for us. You untied it for us. Anybody want to read this one? Yeah, what? Achawait suhete shugachtutan ya yakus getakate hajik anakhas. So let's walk through it again. We just kind of do these in parts. Achaway. What is that one?
That's why.
That is why, because of that. This is all one thing. Suhete shugachtutan.
You open.
We will open it again. And Tlingit loves categories, so this is opening a hinged container. Could be a door, could be something with a heavy lid, and you're just gonna lift the front like a big old bent wood chest. That would have a heavy lid. So you're just gonna push it up like that, right? And the back ends are gonna stay on there. Yayakusketakate. So remember going back to Achdaya kushuseke. There's yakuske. That is built out of that same verb. And it's a noun that means wisdom. So when you say Achdaya kushuseke, the wisdom about it is around me. Or I guess the wisdom is around me. That's how you sort of say, I understand. So it could be a box of understanding. Dakate comes from da-ka-ut. Da-ka is surrounding something, a surrounding surface, and then ut is a thing. So dakate is a container. You have all kinds. Wu decate is a lunchbox. Ka decate is a coffin. Punch decate is a tobacco pouch. So you can have all kinds of decate, and it's a container. We got this again. Hajir. What is that?
In our possession.
In our possession. This one we got to do all together. Anak haskau dekit. What is that?
Lifted up something?
So the nak part, this has to do with direction and location. I think it has a whole bunch of these words. Towards, away from, over, under, a whole bunch of these things. Nak is to leave something behind. Right? So it's not away from it, specifically leaving it behind. So I could say, don't leave me behind. Right? Like say I forgot something, I did run inside, like don't leave without me. So you could say something like that. There are ways to say hanak haswu'at. They left us behind. That is one of the ways that Hinged talks about people passing away. And that's what it's doing here. Hanak haskau dekit as a verb means they all went off to they moved together. So when you add them up, ha, or in this case, anak haskau dekit, they all died off from it. So when you add it all up, achawetu hete shukach tu tanya yakuske dekit hajik anak haskau dekit. We will open again this box of wisdom that is in our hands and that they all died off from. So there's some powerful concepts in here. And as you learn more and more of the language, these become more than just sort of sounds you make and words you make. They connect it to this speech, which connects it to these prayers, which connects it to this gathering, which connects it to this building movement of language learners and speakers. Thoughts or anything else you folks wanted to look at in this?
Can you actually see what they put down for the English translation of
Yeah.
those three?
So left in our care, and it's not wrong, but it's sort of like it's another one. Like if there's a big group of people and then they all left, I could say they all left and they left together. But if in a certain context, if I said they all died off and left me here. So it kind of depends on the context, because certain things in Hinged, when you say it, it just kind of means a certain other thing. It just depends on the context. So I had sort of, let's see.
Renee?
Ah,
There's one word there that I feel like I'd like you to say. It's up there it says aha walk kia ka. Yeah, walk kia ka. And I didn't see what the translation was. I know it has to do with eyeballs. Walk kia ka. That interest to me is the kia ka.
Yeah, so let me pull all the parts out that are in here. So there's yeah. So here's all the parts. I'm using the wrong font here. Hold on. So these are the parts. So ha, is the object, and that's us. Waq is eyes. This part here, it actually probably has this in it, sorry. If you said this form of the verb without the waq on there, it's telling someone to do something. So in this case, when you say ha waq kiyaqa, it's a pretty unusual verb, but it means you told us to look at it. You, singular, told us to look at it. And I don't think it's used very often. And so when we put it together, like, so these elders are getting together to talk about our culture, to talk about our language, and they're doing a couple things, as they're sort of saying, this is probably kind of our last chance. Like you go back to 1980, you still have quite a few speakers, but most of them are very old, and they've also witnessed 2 complete generations with 0 new speakers. And they're watching a 3rd generation probably be born at this time, again, knowing that nobody new is learning the language. It's a very scary thing for them to see. So I think what they're continuing to reference is this idea of the language and the culture coming back to day-to-day use. And so what he keeps referencing here is like, it's not the happiest thing, but he's saying we don't have the opportunity to see it. But I think what they were saying at this time, because extreme wisdom, extreme like language ability, culture ability, tied into like speeches that are prayers. But I think what they're saying in these speeches is like, we won't live to see it, but we're gonna make it happen. And it's all when you take the deep dive into this stuff, which I think is fun, is you can just keep coming back in and kind of like, I don't know what this verb is. Why did he use that? I don't know. There's an eye on the verb, right? And so there's an eyeball on there, you can see it. Because if you change this to ha jikiyaqa, you told us to work on it. Okay. And you could also say haqaqiyaqa, you told us to say it. This is the same verb that's in yaqisku qiq, the tide commander. We got 1 minute. Any other questions that I can answer in 1 minute? Or thoughts? Things?
Where can we find this outside of class?
Yeah, so whenever I teach a class, I put the recording and everything that we go over in class on clinkitlanguage.com. Just go to Learning Tlingit and then to Intermediate or Advanced. I'll put it on both. Sometime tonight. Sometimes it takes me a couple of days, but I usually am on top. So you'll be able to watch the recording of the class. You'll be able to get a PDF version of this speech. You'll also be able to download the speech yourself if you want to have it. It's an MP3 file. So you can put it on your device, and then you can have it. You listen to it all you want. Come back, study it, and you go through these different steps as you start to learn more and more Tlingit. You start to come in with different intentions. Maybe you say, I want to find all the verb roots, and I want to look them up so I can see what verbs they're using. I want to see what's going on with the classifier. I want to be able to translate every single thing myself. So the idea was, I'll put a Word and Pages version of this one up, which has a column in between, so you could try and translate it yourself. You can, and there's different ways. Like, this is what this verb looks like if you pull it apart and you see all the little pieces that are in there, which is something we do in intermediate and advanced Tlingit to say, let's look at all the pieces so you can see what's in there, and then you'll learn how to smush them up together yourself. That was less than 1 minute. That was more than 1 minute. Okay. Good cheese. Tachonach yekeyuch satini. Uta.
Tish. Tiakotin.
Tish, Tiakin.
Tish, Tiagan.
Benashish Tiagan.
Ah.
Diagen.
Tish.
Tish.